All right. Anything you say from here on out may be used against you. We are recording this today. We'll post it later on Facebook on the Rogers County Wireless Association page on Facebook. If you don't have Facebook, send me an email. I'll follow up with you and send a recording to you, link to it. This gentleman is one of our other presenters coming up later today. We'll be talking about being a rover. There's actually other parts of amateur radio other than digital, believe it or not, right there. So,
well, we have digital on board as well.
Digital on board with what you've done, yeah. What time will you be presenting at?
Same time, the DX Association. So 1 o'clock, I think.
Yeah, okay. That'll be perfect. Let me go ahead and kick things off. I'm Jeff Scoville, AE5ME. I think we've got maybe a few visitors online that are joining us through the Zoom meeting. This is the first time that we've done a live stream of the Green Country Amateur, Green Country Hamfest. Hamfest has had forums for years. It's been around for quite some time, but we like to do things that push technology over time here. Appreciate Kai Vargas' help here acting as my cameraman because otherwise I'd jump in between 3 computers here. Yeah, it started out before we actually went live on the recording here, but asked you guys how many of you heard about FreeDV, played with FreeDV, etc. We have one person that's actually been on FreeDV, but so I'm going to start pretty basic as far as I'm going to cover as far as what FreeDV is all about. The reason it's called FreeDV is, interestingly enough, the author of the codec 2, which it uses, actually encountered a case in which the codecs, the digitizing things that we use, were not free. We're not patent free. We're not royalty free. And I won't go into all the details here because a lot of it's legal stuff, etc. But the bottom line is he wanted to do digital voice several years ago on HF. He worked with a commercial codec that he thought he had, Twitter used to use and everything else, and it turned into be kind of a thorny thing to work with. So then he turned around and actually developed a fully open source, patent-free codec. For those of you that come to some of my past presentations, M17 is something that I cover. M17 actually uses the same codec, the codec 2 that he developed back in 2009, which is a voice codec. And part of the reason this is an issue, all your radios that you have, your Yaesus, your DMR radios, your D-Star radios, and everything else, all use the exact same chip to do the encoding, which is licensed to one company that has the exclusivity on the agreement. And by no means am I saying that that makes them a bad company or anything else. They develop the technology, they're allowed to do that. But when you try to do things as an amateur radio operator to do development in that area, it becomes an issue in terms of licensing, how do you do it, et cetera. For example, if you want to use their source code, they're not going to give it to you because that's their intellectual property. If you're trying to host it up on the cloud, in many cases, it's very hard to do. So there's just lots of things that make it very difficult. If you want to improve upon their product, really difficult because they're not going to do the source code, not going to give you the information behind it, their secret sauce. You know, we don't pay a royalty for FM or AM or sideband or anything like that. So that's the reason why anything we do in the digital area that can't be open source is to our advantage as a hobby to be able to continue to grow, continue to develop. Plus, it also gives us the ability to customize it to our hobby. A lot of commercial users, like for example, DMR, you have to have a 7-digit code as an identifier, which makes perfect sense if you're in a commercial radio system. Doesn't make a lot of sense when you have a call sign, you know, only has one number in it and the rest is letters, etc. So the fact that we can do this type of development is very important. So back in 2009 timeframe, David Rowe created what was called Codec 2, and it's basically a low bit rate, meaning in the bandwidth that we operate within as far as FM, AM, sideband codec. And the reason it's called a codec is it takes speech, converts it into a digital data stream that can then be received on the other side, decoded, and then create that same audio over again. but does it so in a very low bit rate environment so that you're able to use a two-way radio as opposed to what we're used to on the internet with huge, gigabit and above bandwidths to transmit things. So codec 2 was really the whole start of amateur radio getting into open source digital voice. It has everything from 3200 down to 450 bits per second codec modes. If you actually compare it to the old AMBI, advanced multiband excitation, it does better. And you can do lots of comparisons. The whole foundation to start with was getting something that was open source. And then the next step was creating an application that used it. And that's what FreeDV has been since its inception. It pretty much tracks with the same time frames back in the 2010 on time frames. It's gone through several iterations. And especially in the last few years, it has made tremendous strides in terms of the actual encoding. It's moved on beyond codec 2 to a thing called RAID, R-A-D-E. And that's actually an artificial intelligence type algorithm that optimizes itself to your voice. And so what's happened is it's really made it a very nice sounding type audio. And the thing that I'll add to this is all being done on the HF bands. How many people here have had a full quieting HF discussion, HF exchange with somebody with no hiss, no noise in the background, and you set the squelcher on your radio, it dropped off perfectly and everything? How many have had that in the last month or so? You've been close.
Japan on 10 meters at FM.
Okay, FM, exactly. Yeah. So the FM side, I agree with completely. If you said you did it on a sideband, I'd be like, I don't think so. So we've all grown accustomed that when we operate on sideband, it is what it is. You're going to get hiss, you're going to get noise, you're going to get drift. As my daughter calls it, the Daffy Duck mode that starts kicking in there. You're going to start having stations moving up and down in tone quality. And that's just a feature of the way sideband works. It was actually developed, I believe, in the 40s and 50s type time frames. So that was what they lived with back then. And just being able to talk, let alone being high fidelity, was good enough at that time, but we've used it for many years since then. So the bottom line is that's what we're used to operating on HF with. What does this create in terms of problems for the amateur radio operator? Well, number one, if you're around other people that are in the room, you can drive them nuts with that hissing noise and all that stuff going on. Anytime that I get on voice and I'm operating, my wife literally has to leave the room because the constant hiss sound just drives her nuts after 2 or 3 hours. From a practical standpoint, I can tell you I know of at least 2 emergency operation centers that will not allow HF rigs in the emergency operation center because the people sitting there are going to be listening to that hiss all the time, and it really drives them nuts. They may not be able to hear the other radios, etc. So that's a practicality that you have. Also, because there's lots of fading and other things that goes on, we learn very well to do forward error correction via human, which means we repeat ourselves over and over again, and we do things phonetically, and we do all this type of stuff, and that just comes with the territory. If we're doing this for fun, we'll probably put up with it. But there's another side in our hobby, which is emergency operations, supporting served agencies, etc. And when you come to the table with them with something that kind of sounds like this, it's sometimes hard to get their excitement of, oh, wow, you guys are doing new and breakthrough things here, except your communication seems very primitive compared to our 800 megahertz systems, trunk systems, etc. So it's hard sometimes to sell the whole HF side as part of the package based on sideband. What I'm going to show you today with FreeDV is this goes to the next generation. This isn't just an incremental improvement that, we got a noise blanker or something that takes out a little bit of the noise that you have in a signal, whatever. This is a total rewriting of the way you've done HF. So I'm going to start out here, and this is one of the few times I'm going to demand you guys to read back to me what you hear on these signals and tell me which one's better than the other. And it may be difficult to tell the difference between the two, so maybe not as fair as I could be, but I'm going to play first a 1500 hertz, 2000 kilometer path on 20 meters running with a few watts of transmitted power, so it's definitely not very strong. But I'm going to play the sideband signal first. And if you could, just kind of mentally make some notes here, and then I'll ask you some questions about the transmission. So did everybody get that?
Yeah.
Just checking to be sure if you guys, feel free to write it down on the pad there, word for word. what
Was that
happened.
forward error correction you speak of? Yeah.
That was lost on that whole thing. And that's with a few watts of transmit power. I've been in contacts like that before that they go down there and you're like, you know, I need a hearing aid, I need something to pull us out of there. So with that transmission, the same operator, the same station, the same output and everything else, the operator turned around and went into the FreeDV mode and actually made the contact that way. So I'm going to play this one right now. I have to apologize about the audio quality on this thing all up front and everything. So, you know, when you guys are writing down what he says here, I feel for you after that first test. So which one do you like better?
So a couple questions.
Yeah.
That is the same wattage, the guy who was talking before.
Exactly.
He was same distance from the mic,
Yes.
and this is totally the encoding of the difference is the encode.
The difference is the encoding because it has automatic gain control. So it allows it to when the whatever's coming across there fills up the wave space better. It also the encoding, because it has error correction built into it, the decoding on the other side is much better because when you just go regular sideband, if you have dropouts, you just go away. Just go ahead.
Bandwidth differences.
Exactly the same bandwidth. Okay. Yeah. So that
What part of the band do you use?
Um,
Digital or voice?
voice, typically voice there. And this uses typically a voice bandwidth, so it's encoding it within a voice bandwidth, but it's doing a better job of encoding because it has what's called a modem, which takes all that digital stuff, converts it to waveforms that go across there, and those waveforms then are received by the other station, in turn decodes it, goes that route.
Where do you find people that are other DV people online?
You can go up to freedv.org and they list a lot of different organizations.
No, what I mean is like,
Yeah.
it's sort of like PSK reporter.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? If I
Yes.
could have DB and where am I at, what frequency, that's pretty cool.
I've seen them on PSK.
PSK recorder does
Change the
show.
mode to free DV.
Yeah, if you change it to FreeDV up there, you'll see on PSK recorder.
Okay,
So I would start out with that one, get everybody's attention of why are we doing this? Because believe it or not, several years ago when I gave a presentation to FreeDV, it's kind of funny. I start stuff early. Does anybody know about WinLink by any chance? Anybody play with WinLink at all? Yeah. I was doing WinLink 2000 back in 2000. This is now 26 years later. I'm telling people I was there to give a presentation. Three people were really excited about it.
15 years old.
Yeah, exactly. And so the point being is that back many years ago, FreeDV did exist, but it was hard to get people convinced to do digital on HF. And they're like, oh, I got to plug a computer in, I got to do all this stuff. I absolutely understand it, but so here is a high signal noise rate sample. So that was with very low power and everything else. So we're going to do more like what you do in normal operation. So let's listen to the HF guy there. Yeah, so that's him on sideband. So go ahead.
What were the bit rates of first and second samples?
Well, the first sample was sideband, so there's no bit rate on that.
I mean, I'm referring to first digital.
The first DV.
Yeah, the two digital.
Oh, the two digital ones right there. I believe those were running at the. I don't have it written up
It sounds
here.
like the second one's higher.
Yeah, I want to say it's at 2400 is what I believe on. So, the big point to it is that when you even are in a high signal noise ratio condition, make sure that doesn't go off. When you're in a high signal noise ratio condition, this just sounds even better than sideband. It's got a more dynamic range to it. It also has equalization built into it so that it sounds more natural to a voice. This is not going to start shifting like a sideband signal does because it's decoding the data stream and it's going to do that relative to a standard versus on a sideband, you're actually taking a chunk of spectrum and you're trying to figure out what it's going to sound like on audio. And if you're off on your tuning, that's going to make the adjustment and make things not sound the same way.
What does that sound like if you're not using FreeDV?
What does that sound like?
The digital, is it?
Yeah,
like
the
listening to
digital.
DVR?
Is it-
Sounds like a.
Yeah, I actually have it up right here. This is one of the first generation codecs, but this will give you an idea.
That's
So it's
really
it's pretty easy to tell when somebody's on digital voice there. You can't miss. This was an example. Let's see. Yeah, this is with active traffic, and then during the idles. So that kind of gives you an idea what it sounds like. It's got a framing to it as it sends out things. So if you listen real closely, you can actually tell each frame that's going out with the digital voice on it.
How forgiving is it when receiving it about being on frequency?
Pretty forgiving because it actually will adjust itself. I've been off easily, a couple hundred hertz. I had a problem with this. And I actually tested it out on a QRP rig that I have that by its very design, it's one of the ones that came out of India. It's the Microbit X. I don't know if anybody's ever played with one of those, but you turn that thing on, and if you happen to have something like a fluorescent light in the background, you can actually hear it sweep the entire band while it warms up. And I actually used this on that and never had a bad problem on time. It stayed there the entire time, which that's probably the worst rig in terms of drift that I've ever dealt with there. So that gives you an idea of why we're doing this. In addition to inputting information out over the air, as far as the digital voice is concerned, it also can carry metadata, text, and other things, and it also can carry your call sign. So that makes, one of the biggest problems I always have in HF is getting the other station's call sign. And once again, we do the human forward error correction, and we repeat our call sign many times. And I don't know, my call sign is AE5ME. It makes sense to me. I've got an HKW, whatever coming back, it's just the virtue of what goes with it. With this, even if you had a very short contact, and let's say band conditions really change, you just totally lose connection, you still would see which station you were talking to before they dropped out, and much faster than you would doing it phonetically back and forth.
Make sure I understand. You mean it encodes your call sign in the digital stream? or
Yes.
Not just your voice saying it, but it actually has it.
Actually has it digital stream. It's one of your settings to put the software. Yeah.
Does any logging software integrate with that? Pick it up. And just...
There are some out there, and I don't know exactly because I don't do a lot of logging there, but there are ones that will integrate it.
So is this pretty much point to point? Can I hear other people's
You
conversations?
can hear other people's conversations.
Is there an FM capture effect kind of thing?
It's more down the line what will happen if you do have two people key up at the same time. All of a sudden, you'll hear what the one person was saying, and then it'll switch right into the other one. It's kind of like an FM capture, but it will oscillate between the two. It's all of a sudden you're hearing someone, some another. It doesn't generally just stay on one right there.
Sounds like it's hitting a keyframe.
Yeah, it's keyframe, goes and jumps back and forth. So, like anything, if you do a double, your mileage varies type thing. The good thing about it is you don't get the heterodyne mix that you sometimes get on SSB, which can be very, very, if you get just right there, it can make your dog very unhappy and everything. So that's a big advantage that I see to it. As we went further along,
Do you manually set the bit rate, or does it automatically figure that out?
it figures that out, but you can adjust it to what you want to do. In fact, I'll pull the software up here and I'll talk a little bit about it. There is backward compatibility to the old codec 2, as well as running it in the rate mode. You can run it different modes depending on what you want to do.
I'm assuming the software runs on Linux, runs on Windows.
Yes.
And does not need a very powerful computer. Raspberry Pi would probably work.
I believe Raspberry Pi 5 want to run on for this because it is a high end on the CPU use, the RAID. part of it is. If you use codec 2, it's not nearly as process intensive. The rate is developed, the higher end processing line. So a really old PC will have difficulties with it if you don't have something that's what I would say i5, i7 versus if you're trying to put i3 or dual core or something from a few decades ago, it really will struggle there. But you need a higher end for doing the RAID stuff.
Do you need a fancy video card to do the AI part?
No, okay, not at all. So we'll pull up another sample here. So that was Joey out of Texas over to Australia. He's running about 25 watts. Here's the same one.
K5CJ testing 1, 2, 3. No auto encoder. She sells seashells down by the seashore. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. K5CJ.
So that I intentionally added in here because it's truth in advertising. There was a problem in the past. You heard where he kind of dropped out. There was kind of a jumble. That's what you're going to get if there's just a total drop out of signal. It's similar to what you do get on DMR and other places. It's not an R2D2 where it goes, makes noises, but you will get a skip over. You'll get some weird artifacts in there. It'll find itself again. So, you know, I don't try to oversell this to everybody, but every single time you're not going to have problems because every transmission you do, even ones that I've done on high power on FM, if you have interference, if you have distances, what have you, you conceivably can't drop out of the signal. But you'll notice it recovers pretty quickly after that. It's not like once it starts skipping, you don't get the rest of the transmission. It recovers pretty well. So this was an interesting one. He actually did a left channel, right channel comparison. So actually the two channels on my computer here, the left speaker and right speaker, he's actually saying the same thing on sideband versus digital.
K5CJ testing.
Over here is the digital one. Over here is the sideband.
Radio auto encoder. She sells seashells down by the seashore. 1, 2, 3, 5. K5CJ.
So like literally in parallel there, you can hear the sideband one just doesn't have a nice dynamic range to it. It's much lower down in noise. It also doesn't have good equalization to it, whereas the digital one does on that, as far as that's it. Question comes up is other languages. Now that it uses AI and everything, this is actually a gentleman that was operating Taiwan on it. So we'll hear him in sideband again. Here he is.
Secure, secure, secure. This is our extreme of our channel. Now I have to speak Chinese. 1、2、3、4、6、7、8、9、10。中文测试，中文测试。我的话是 EX-ICP， 现在位于台湾台中市 IC730， 它是路率100瓦，1、2、3、4、6、8后。测试结束。
I know that made my translation of Mandarin so much better that second time around. The first time I didn't know that. I don't translate Mandarin, but the point being is, even other languages, it does a good job in codec of getting the nuances of the voice and it learns as it goes along there. So, you know, it's really good as far as operations. So if lost the video again.
Do you have a block diagram and you just use your microphone on your computer?
Yeah, you just use your microphone and computer. I was going to get into that in a second. How do you get started on this? Let me So the first thing that you're gonna do, the first thing that you're gonna do is actually go to the freedv.org website, go to downloads and download the software. I'll show you how to get there in a second, because I've actually got two computers that I'm running here today.
Is it a registered, I mean, does Logbook of the World have like a 3-letter code for it, mode?
I don't know that they do yet. And I think that was a discussion a few months ago that they still have not set up something with this. But once you download FreeDV, you can pick the modem and mode that you want to run with. And there's an easy setup that you go to. And I'm just going to talk you through this. The first thing that trips up a lot of people is you're not talking through the microphone of your radio anymore. You're talking through a microphone to the computer, and the computer plugs to your radio and sends stuff out. How many people here do FTA and other? Okay, lots of people. You know how you do FTA? Little sound card interface, or if you're lucky enough to have a radio that has a built-in sound card, do it that way. You do the same thing here. And it was kind of funny when I did the presentation at the Rogers County Wireless Association. Up until that point, everybody's like, "Oh man, I'm really scared about this." And I said, "FTA, like universal." "Oh yeah, that's easy to do. I did that last week." I said, "It's the same thing. Your sound card interface, and now you're using either the microphone on the computer or a separate microphone on the computer to encode your voice into there." So really, very easy to set up. So if you're going to first get a sound card interface or a radio with sound card interface, get everything configured there. Then you're going to select your sound device for the radio, which is what's doing like FTA and everything else. And then you're going to pick the sound device for the encoding, which is your microphone and your speakers on your computer itself. And then you're off and running.
So do you have a WSJTX kind of port software for the codec or what?
Yeah, there is, you can do either ham live, cat control, or you can actually do serial PTT if you want to push talk out.
What does the FreeDV software run? You just have an app?
You have an app that's on your computer. It's on the computer.
Yeah, normally we select digital on the radio, but then that affects your bandwidth.
Yeah.
Of course, you're still doing the voice bandwidth with FTA, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, in this case, your radio is still going to be an SSB, or when you put it in digital. I guess
Typically, you could put it in digital mode, but you could also put it in sideband mode. This is as long as you have it pulling
Configured to do that.
configured to pass the information that's coming through the sound card.
USB ported.
Yeah.
The other nice thing is instead of having a high headset, you can do this with just USB.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do a USB high headset. You can get a nice high fidelity headset if you want to for your computer, which there's plenty out there for podcasters, people like that. It does open up your potential of equipment to use as far as that's concerned. But I have it now. It's actually starting mode. You don't see that on the screen because I'm on my second computer here. But you basically tell it to start the modem, which is going to start it running and actually coding and decoding. And then once you're in that mode, you can pick what mode you want to run in with your friend, as far as that's concerned. RAID is the preferred mode. It's the newest, latest, greatest, has all the bells and whistles that are out of modes built into it. If you have to have other friends that like to talk in some of the other things. First question always comes up, which frequency do you get on? The program itself actually has recommended frequencies for each of the bands, so you can just drop down to those frequencies. Other people are doing the same. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions.
It's great.
If I'm a listener, I assume this software figures out which mode the guy is broadcasting and it clicks right to.
Yes. Yes. It also has the ability that you can switch to analog. So if you are sitting there and for whatever reason you want to switch over to analog real quick, you don't have to pull all the cables off or anything else. You can just switch over to analog. Talk to your Luddite friends that are operating in the 20th century. Oh my God, guys, I like to give people a hard time there, but the reality is we're going to still operate sideband pricing and get a lot of the software to do it versus having to plug all your cables.
Have you tested it on VHF Plus?
Yes.
No
Yeah.
artifacts. higher frequencies.
No, it does a great job. I've done on 2 meter sideband a bunch of times. I think I did do it once on 440 sideband. It works real nice in there.
Okay.
And the added benefit to that is if you run this on sideband, you get 2 meter 440, you get a lot higher range as far as distance is concerned. So somebody that I used to
I
make.
think also 23 centimeters, but it's really hard to make a long range.
Exactly.
This
This is the tip all the way. Yeah, 23 centimeters. I've tried to do that on FM. And it's like, holy cow, that's a hard one. And the example that I gave with my friend across town, we were doing 2 meter sideband versus 2 meter FM. And 2 meter FM, nothing, he was there. What happened? 2 meter sideband were just perfect. So this opens up a hole. And the neat thing about it is, you notice every time they stop transmitting, it just drops off. So you don't have that, continued static, trying to pull them out of the static, that we're used to. So it gives you all the advantages of FM, but you're running on sideband with the spectrum that's used by sideband. So you first of all have all the same, no carrier going out, but then also you have the reduced requirements for transmission. So if you do 2 meter sideband or 440 sideband with it, it's a huge advantage.
Contesting.
Yes,
Do any of the contesting say this can't be used?
none of them banned them now. Nobody has said that.
I can imagine to make field day a lot more fun, but it would kind of capture the strongest signal.
Yes.
So you'd be kind of at a disadvantage if you didn't have much power.
Yeah. I won't say that you couldn't possibly pull somebody out on sideband that you don't with this, because it didn't quite make the threshold to be towed. There's probably that little stringer station there you can find, but it also makes things a lot more straightforward to there. So if you have decent stations there, this would be much easier to hit the serial that, you got stations all up and down that you're trying to make contacts with. And then the other thing is, I don't know about you guys, it must just be a Tulsa Amateur Radio Club thing. I'm picking a cut right there when I say that, but where we're located was actually in a park right next to an AM broadcast station. Made 80 meters fun, put it bluntly. You do get on sideband noise that just pops into the signal and everything. And I've operated this in high noise environments, and it doesn't affect there. If you had like a fluorescent tube that you held 2 inches away from the radio, I'm sure you'd get to a point of absolutely destroying everything. But if you have small electrical noise, things that sort, it doesn't make the copy hard at all, versus when you're on a sideband, you can sit there and have as strong an interference signal as you do the original signal. You're trying to pull it out of the noise.
It seems like this could be embedded into a radio if somebody would put it on.
Absolutely. And I would see down the line this will probably happen because it is open source, free to put out there and everything else. I think the manufacturers are going to seriously look at it down the line. Can't tell you when, but I think it's something they would definitely look at because it just provides a lot of advantages.
Is it generally upper sideband on all the?
Yes. Yeah. So when you actually put all your information into this, one of the items that you select is how to run the modem. You have duplex or full duplex, which most of the time you already have duplex since you don't have a radio that can receive traffic at the same time.
Any way you can put that up on the screen?
Yeah, I can do that here. So let me swap this out here.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the UI is.
Absolutely.
Can you send a text message along with your voice?
Yes. Switch out computers here. All right. So this is actually the software itself I've got open. Get out of that. Put this out. So there it is opening. That's actually what the UI looks like there. It comes up on the screen. This middle portion right here is your waterfall. And so when I tell it to start the modem, they'll actually see it. We'll do a waterfall down the middle. And then you have all menus on the side here to make your various selections. And then you have the ability to record your conversations with others. So if I hit start modem on this,
Does this, yeah, it has a simple interface with the radio, but if you popped over to the single sideband, how would you do the more fine tuning? Do you need another piece of software to do that for you? Or do it yourself manually?
you would just do it yourself manually, fine tuning. You can use software like, what's it called?
FL
FL Rig and things like that, if you really want to do those types of things there. There we are, we just kicked it off. You can see, this is actually, picking up the waterfall noise we have in the room here, because I've got it set up as if it was connected to the radio, just to have something to show up here to kind of put some color on the screen, but it basically sits there and tries to code out. You have a button called PTT, so instead of hitting a mic, you have to hit PTT. And I guarantee you, if you get into this, there will be at least once you'll forget about it and be sitting there and you're looking down and you're like, wow, it's really quiet. I wonder why they haven't come back yet. And you look up and realize you're still transmitting. So it is a culture shock to go that way.
Yeah, Jeff, and just general running this, I've run it a couple of times, and one of the things that got me was normally you tune on a sideband and you always have a little background static and you kind of hear what's going on.
Yeah.
But this is just always quiet, and all of a sudden someone shows up.
All of a sudden somebody just pops up and there they are. Exactly. So
And that's a bit of a surprise.
yes, yeah. I do know some people, just to kind of give them a little bit of between there, they will turn up the speaker on their radio, because you can't leave the speaker on your radio, and they'll listen for the digital sound and stuff coming across, and that's their way of telling them, you know, it's like a security blanket for them. Oh yeah, I still hear the electrons moving here. It's great, you know. But the reality is, I prefer to leave the audio off of the radio completely, because I thought the static from sideband was bad enough. I did the other one right there, and my daughter just took one look at me. She goes, "Seriously, now it has a harmonic sound to it." I said, "Well, it's digital."
We talked about the PTT button. Can you program a hotkey on your laptop, like your space bar or an F key to do that?
I think it also does spacebar as well. I just don't bother with that. I don't think, but I think there are some other ones that you can go with that. But the app can be installed on Windows, can be installed on Linux. It's portable in that sense right there.
Where do you get the app?
You go to freedv.org
Okay.
and go to downloads. And we're doing a 30 cents.
So on transmit is you know, they always talk about it's 100 watts if you're doing sideband, and 50 watts if you're doing 58 or whatever. How does this compare in its power usage?
It runs the same as what you do on sideband as far as that's concerned. Most people run 100 watts as they run to operate there. As you can tell from the copyability, that it does, you know, in terms of copyable signal modulation, it does a lot better job than conventional sideband as far as that transmission goes. Like anything, I will tell you this much: difference between it and what you're used to doing on voice, especially if you don't use compression and things of this sort. When you're sitting there running on voice, if you ever looked at it, there's a large amount of that sideband signal that's not modulated fully. When you look at this, just like in your other digital modes, you are full duty through the entire transmission. And so I've seen people with radios that they were set at 100 watts on voice, and it's like no big deal. Then they go to digital, especially FT8 is the one that, why you would run 100 watts on FT8, I have no idea unless you just, but they'll sit there and run for an hour or two, and their radio is you know, very overheated because of it, because you're doing a full duty cycle to it. So in a similar way, if you're on this, you probably want to turn it back a little bit, 50 watts, save the finals, save things from getting totally worn out there.
Well, some radios are built for that.
Exactly. If you have a radio that's got the heat sink and everything set on it, then go to town with it. But if you got some of the older rigs in particular that don't like that, you'll quickly find out how much it costs to replace the finals when you go down that direction.
So has your experience been on HF that, and I think that's what you're applying, that you get a further reach, you can hear people further away, because it's picking up stuff more down in the noise.
Yeah, my experience has been the stations that you probably knew were there, but were really touchy whether or not you were gonna be able to copy them. Those ones you now start having good conversations with. The people that are all the far out, there's just no way you think there's a signal there, and it's just not there at all. Probably don't meet the code threshold on this, but those are also gonna be your jack stations that are way, way far over, kind of like Siberia, places like that, that are just very difficult to get a good path to. But as you saw there was a path from Texas to Australia that it worked perfectly fine on 20 years.
Does it have VHF recommended frequencies?
That's a good question. I have see what they got for recommended deal there. Looks like they stopped. That's interesting how they did it.
Stopped at 10 meters.
No, they stopped at 10 meters, but then they have a 10 gigahertz in there. So all of a sudden they put a 10 gigahertz recommended frequency. So there's got to be somebody out there doing 10 gigahertz. But as you can see, there's everything from 160 meter to 80 meter to 40. Let's see what else they got there. They will, of course, not have 30 meter, because 30 is a digital only band, no voice. And then there's 20 meter, 17 meter.
But you can just
50
turn the
meter.
dial too, right? You'll just tune the dial, right?
You can do that.
These are just presets.
These are just presets that most people hang out in. So
Can you add to that list manually, or
I don't believe so. I don't believe this list can be changed.
what if it was a fine on hours?
Yeah, it may be in there, but the point is, you can find on all different bands people doing this. There are some nets that are out there as well. They get publicized. We are in the process of probably in the next 60 days initializing the 40 meter FreeDV net in the state of Oklahoma. Part of the reason I want to do this year. What we'd like to get to is getting people using this, getting them fluent in FreeDV, and then we'd like to actually turn around to our served agencies to start talking about using it as a path there. Because the biggest issue they run into, and even in Oklahoma has been working on a system called OKN, which is their whole network across the state. And if you believe what they started with, there's not a single square mile in the state that's not covered by it. The reality is there's huge spots that aren't covered because we know 900 megahertz propagation what it's like. Imagine 800, about the same. There's these spots that aren't covered by it. Well, what happens if an emergency happens in a state park, for example? It's over a hill in a bad spot or whatever type of thing. Chances are you're not going to have coverage there. With this, you put somebody out there as an operator with an HF station and doing NVIS, they should be able to talk to the state emergency management and things of that sort. So this expands our coverage into areas that traditionally were not well served by other technology. As much as I love DMR, Fusion, all these repeaters that are linked on the internet together, anything else, I used to commute quite a bit to Joplin, Missouri, and I found places there is nothing, around. APRS, the same deal. You drive up to Joplin, once you get that basically beyond Bonita area, there's just no digipeaters there. And then you hit Joplin and you're digipeated again. This allows us to operate on a much more individual basis, not need infrastructure to pull off what we're trying to do. Served agencies don't have anything like this. Other questions?
So what are some of those other tabs on that window?
Oh, well, you've got up in the top here, you've got spectrum. Go to spectrum. This tells you by frequency what type of deviation you've got going on. This is the from radio side, which I've actually got set up on my thing here. This is the from mic side, which has nothing because I didn't tell it to go to run off my mic on my computer because I was wanting to make some noise up in the background from it. This is from the decoder. Then you go up into the tools. There's FreeDV locator, which will allow you actually via internet to see who's up there, and you can actually say show call sign, locator, distance, etc.
when I was using that part of it, I noticed it also knew when people were transferring.
Yes, it did. It does.
You can see not only who's like on, because you connect to the internet, but actually who's speaking on what frequency.
Yep.
That would be cool.
Easy setup screen here. First of all, you tell it what radio device, what decoding device. You tell it how you're gonna do your radio control, how you're gonna do your push to talk, how you're gonna do the tune, the frequencies and everything else. It does have setup reporting, so you can get your call sign and get your grid square locator in your recording that goes out. This one. Once you get that past that, there's a whole screen developed here for CAT and PTT, and you can do everything from doing CAT control via ham live to doing a serial device. You can also do different DTR versus RTS depending upon your radio. They do have PTT input. You can put a serial device on your computer and do your PTT via a serial device. So you can make a little keyer thing if you're feeling nostalgic on the whole thing.
Or if you want the push to talk to turn off when you let go.
Exactly. You want to have the ability to totally back out of here.
Which would be a wonderful Bluetooth button that you put on your lapel.
Exactly.
Anyone know of one?
You can buy those.
Oh, okay.
Great concept.
Yeah, but this would be ready.
I know they're Bluetooth. Those push buttons. I don't know if weird again. Hell, these.
Okay.
On options, you've got reporting as well. And you'll notice down there, there's a host name called QSO, freedv.org, and that's where the FreeDV reporter reports go to. And you can basically find out who's on doing FreeDV, which is nice to know, figure out who's up on the air, who you potentially make contacts to.
Did you see a place there that he could talk to a logger?
No, I did not on this. Actually, I take it back. There is enable QSO logging, and there's an IP address and port. So if it has that, it should be able to talk to the logger. Sorry about that. I didn't.
And it lists the loopback address, so I wonder, does it have any native logging? Or is that if you're running that app on your PC, I guess?
That's if you're running the app. It does have a report to PSK reporter and a report to FreeDV reporter, which is of course the internet type stuff. And then this enable QSO logging. The actual port that it put up there is 2237. So that's got to be specific to the software. I don't do logging, so that's not something that's a big thing for me. So I can't comment on how it works with logging.
That's the port for N3FJP.
Okay.
Is that under grid control or reporting?
It's under reporting, under tools reporting.
I think it's a UDP.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just capture it if you need to. Yeah. Just set it up for UDP, and if that doesn't work, switch it to TC.
It does have some neat filtering options to it, a little bit of equalizer stuff. So you can actually apply both to your microphone going out as well as your received audio coming back. Big problem that I have, it's just something just quality of my voice, is I'm very bassy, and in some cases, especially I've noticed with Codec 2, it will emphasize that a little bit more. With this, I can actually turn down the bass, move up the mid range, move up the treble, get it a little bit more pleasing sounding over the air.
So what has held this back? Mainly had to wait for computers to catch up.
There's two things that I would say slowed the adoption to it. The first thing that in the early, I would say 2010 to 2015 timeframe, was the fact that just it was a very small number of people that were working on it, and you didn't really, not like today, you didn't have much social media and things getting out there. So there's a small group, they all know about it, they're doing it in their lab and stuff, but a lot of it wasn't making out to Hamfest and things of that sort. By the time we got to the second half of 2010, I would say the computer power, because like RAID, what it uses now, there wasn't strong enough computers back then to really do the RAID stuff in the early 2010s. So, and the rate stuff made a huge difference in terms of overall audio quality, ability to code low signal noise ratios. The other thing that didn't exist in the 2010s, and I'm going to pick on ARL a little bit when I say this, but you got to realize I'm an ARL member and I strongly support the organization when I say this. ARL was doing nothing to support innovation and things of that sort from like 2000 to 2010 and even a little bit beyond. They were like, hey, we got our own problems. We're trying to figure out things at headquarters. That's great. And we actually have a president of the ARL that said clubs weren't an important focus of ARL because they felt the social media and other things were going to be more important. And so ARL really didn't do much to help that out. Then came along an organization, my favorite one to talk about all the time, the Amateur Radio Digital Foundation, the ARDC guys. And basically, when that foundation came along, it's got tremendous funding. Anybody heard of the ARDC at all in here? A few people? Do you have any idea what type of funding capabilities they have behind them?
Well, they had, I think that they sold some frequencies.
Yeah, they sold
it's like 2 billion or something.
$200 million.
200 million.
$200+ million. So right now, all the assets of ARL all together, Mr. Bob Stratton told me this several years ago. It's right around about like 37 million. I think 18 million of it's liquid, et cetera. Don't quote me on these numbers, but ARL is basically a $37 million organization, all assets in. This is literally almost 10 times larger. And so ARDC came along, and that's part of what this is one of the people who received ARDC funding was the FreeDV project. So now you have people funding things that weren't funding it back in the 2010 time frame. And so that's made a huge difference. M17, which is the VHF equivalent of this, didn't get off the ground by its own funding. It received two $250,000 grants from the ARDC early on. We have that now that we didn't have a decade ago, 2 decades ago. And that's something exciting to see because the innovation is speeding up quite a bit in amateur radio because of this funding versus where we were at before.
The other thing that would help is everybody has experience with FTA.
Yes.
And this is a real easy, yeah, I can do that too.
Yes. I can tell you, if you really want to go back to the old times, I say this, I say, there were people that lived in the last century, myself included. But the point is, in 1999, when the first digital modes started being done, like PSK31 as an example, the amateur radio community, just the thought of plugging the computer into your radio and all that type of stuff, there were no digital radio interfaces available then that were just plug and play and go. You had to make it yourself. And so the mainstream part of amateur radio was not digital radio ready to even go into this type of thing. And so that was another reason. If this had been developed, let's say 1999, they would have had the same adoption issues. If you ever look at a PSK31 adoption curve, how many people are involved, literally the first 8 years of it was like 2 guys in their backyard. And then all of a sudden, boom, it just went off because of magazine articles and things like that. Same thing true of FTA. When FTA first came out, it's a professor and his friends type thing. And then when everybody saw how cool it was, social media got into it, magazine articles went out there, it literally went to like 200,000, 300,000 people, literally overnight.
It displaced PSK31 in a couple of years.
In a couple of years, exactly. So the point is, that's a lot of what's changed to make this a lot more adoptable than it had been back in time. Yeah, here we are at 9:53. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you guys signed into the sheet and passed it around. If I've got your email address, you will get some information from, where to go to download the software, information of that sort. When we get to the point where we're rolling out the FreeDV net here in Oklahoma, I'll send an email out to you guys. Encourage you guys to check it out. One of the neat things that I can see that it could eventually tie into, and I was talking to a gentleman here at the Hamfest about, believe it or not, back in the early 2000s, I used to actually link a 2-meter repeater to a sideband port that was going out. Of course, I was the person being the control station and everything else like that. And we used a very, very kludgy 12 circuit, things of that sort and everything else. But, you learn doing that it's like near impossible to do. Nobody, we did this experiment. Hey, that was really nice to do for a couple of weeks. Let's move on with life here. But now that this is getting to the point where it's FM like, I can see this tying into some of the amateur radio digital networks like Fusion, stuff like that. Now you have the ability, this is the dream. Somebody's walking around with their handy talkie at the Hamfest here, and they're talking to their friend who's up there doing a POTA activation up in Northeast Oklahoma, away from everybody, and they can't tell the difference between the two. It's just like they were sitting right across from each other. That would be cool.
Sounds like some radio did even implement their handheld or phones.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Well, I appreciate everybody's time here. I appreciate you coming out to the Hamfest. We always appreciate you guys out here, and then especially appreciate you guys coming out to our forums here. I really enjoy doing this stuff. If you haven't been able to tell already here, but I just have a lot of fun with this, and this is what the hobby's about: is sharing this type of information. So if you gain something from this today, I hope that helped you get closer to trying some new stuff on the air. So
Thank you.
thank you very much. Report, they stop recording.
Right. VHF presentations at 12 o'clock.
There you go. Got that board right here. Stop it. It's there. They stop recording. And yes.